Hey everybody, this is Chris from Killer Arcade Games. Thank you guys so much for the awesome response to this cabinet. I love this cabinet. You guys seem to love the cabinet. I'm really excited about the whole thing. I didn't think that people would care that much about the build process, but apparently they do. Now, I did lose a lot of footage when I was building it, but I found some that I can actually make somewhat of a video out of, and what I thought I would do is just kind of go over the cabinet, tell you guys the steps I took to build this cabinet, what I did, and all that, just in case you want to end up building one for yourself. So here we go. The first step was to actually build the cabinet. I had to put it together. It was a Final Fight cabinet. It doesn't matter so much what cabinet you pick. I would go for something as cheap as possible. I wouldn't probably go for a 4-player though. But you do have to at least put the cabinet together enough to measure everything out. What I initially did was put the sides on, didn't put the monitor in. I needed to do this because I needed to know exactly where to put the marquee. Now, you'll notice from the side view here, the marquee goes all the way up to where I cut the cabinet off. So what I did was set it in there. I knew I wanted to have it tilted back way more than a normal marquee. This thing is leaning pretty far back, if you can see it right there. I wanted that to be so when you walk by the cabinet, you're looking at it and it's kind of looking back at you rather than just, you don't want it to be straight looking this direction. So find where you want your marquee tilt. And by the way, this is an Arcade Game Factory marquee. I'll leave a link in the description for all the stuff I talk about. This is the one I ordered from them. And it's best to have the marquee before you make your cuts so you know exactly where you want to cut it. So once I figured out where I wanted the marquee, I actually measured very carefully from the bottom up and realized that was pointless. You really don't need to do that. You can actually just take the edge of the marquee, once the full cabinet's still here, right where you want that marquee tip to be, just mark a Sharpie line across there, make sure it's really even and perfect, make sure you know what you're going to get. Once you mark it across the top, then you can just double check it and basically take the cabinet apart. And once you have the cabinet apart, you can take the sides outside and just chop them off. But of course, be extremely careful when you're doing that because you're going to be pretty screwed if you mess up the cuts, or you're going to be forced to change your cabinet. So once the sides were cut, I ended up coming back in, putting the cabinet back together. And this wood up here was a raw wood look, you know, similar to this here. And painted the top of that so it looks pretty darn good. You really can't even tell it was cut unless you're looking really closely at it. After that, you need to mount your marquee once you put it back in place. What I did was buy countersink drill bits, which means it drills the hole and it leaves a hole behind so you don't have screws sticking out. The hole for mine is actually, I can barely feel it. Actually, yeah, so the hole for mine is right here under the art. But here's a view from the inside. Sorry about the washed out look with these LEDs on. I just drilled a screw through here. If I could do it all over again, I'd probably use like a machine screw with a bolt on the end of it, but this worked out. It's nice and sturdy, especially once everything else is put into place. Now what I did after that is take a piece of MDF and actually cut it down after measuring in between these two spots here and seeing how far forward I wanted it. I took a piece of MDF and basically just cut it to what I needed. Now I can't unfortunately show you without really changing up the cabinet right now, but I can't show you this without taking all this apart, unfortunately, but the marquee dips back like this, so what I had the piece of wood do is meet right up with it. So it basically just touches up against the marquee, and that's good to go. Now, when I built it, I didn't expect for the monitor to sit on top. It actually happened by accident. When I was putting it on, it worked out perfectly, so I just left it like that. And as you can see from this side, you really can't see where it is, so if you don't want to have it meet perfectly like that, it doesn't really matter that much. That's up to you if you're building one of these. So once I got my MDF cut, it was still raw wood. This is just covered in vinyl right now currently. But I did the same thing with the countersink drill bits, drilled some holes. I did 4 holes, 2 on each side, sunk some screws into the side of it after drilling some pilot holes because I did not want to risk splitting this wood. Once the MDF piece was in place, I was able to start trying out where I wanted the monitor. This may be a trial and error thing you want to do. This one came with 2 mounts. It doesn't show it in the paperwork, which is interesting. This mount is actually one you can screw or bolt into whatever you're doing, and then the pipe screws into it. Originally, I used the one that was a clamp on, so it could go back here and clamp to the back. Now, you're not going to be able to get that smooth look right here, depending on which monitor you use. This is a very smooth look, and you're just not going to be able to get that with the clamp in most cases. But I at least clamped it on first just to make sure I liked how it looked. Everything was functional, and once I liked how it looked, I took the clamp off, measured exactly where I wanted this, and I really just kind of roughly measured it with kind of eyeballing it, and it worked perfectly. I put 4 bolts through here. There is one in the center of this pipe You can't see it because in the center of the mount, it's down inside of there. I went ahead and put these extra 2 just for extra stability and safety. Now once I got the monitor mounted, it was kind of like, okay, we can finally make some progress here. I mounted my aim track sensor bar on top, which is going to be going soon. I finally ordered the Sinden guns. They're on their way. Hopefully they'll be here February. The TV was in place, so that meant it was time to get the computer in there. Now this is the HP that I recommend to everybody for almost all projects. This thing covers all bases. I do get a little bit of stuttering on CarnEvil and occasionally a tiny stutter on Area 51, but otherwise this computer is really great for emulation in general. I will leave a link to this one in the description. I have not done all my cable management totally yet, but as you can see, I put it in here. I always take the side panel off of them now because it just helps keep the cabinet cooler. I'm not going to go into the setup of the software because I have a whole video on that. If you need to know how to essentially mod an arcade one up using this PC, using a lot of the other products I used in this video, please check the description. There'll be a link for that video. It'll give you everything you need to know on that. After that, I went ahead and put the Logitech system in here. I hadn't really planned to use that system this time, but it just was what had to be done. So that's what's in here. I'm not in love with it, but I like the sound it produces. Once that was in place, I started just kind of testing the gun, make sure everything worked. I only have one gun currently because I knew I was probably switching to Sinden. And once I realized everything was working just fine with this light gun, I went in and put that aside, and it was time to tear apart the Final Fight control deck. You really don't need a lot of buttons. I do plan to hopefully put a trackball one day in here. That's down the line though, but for just a straight up shooter cabinet, you really don't need a lot of buttons. So this is just so you can navigate up and down in Launchbox, and these purple buttons exit the games. I am going to change up the color scheme soon though. I mentioned this in my other video, but this is very handy. It just goes right up underneath the control deck in the J panel, and it was perfect. A very simple control deck. This was actually a joy. Took just a few minutes to set up. All I did was wire up, 6 buttons, and that was it. And by the way, guys, if you have holes in your control deck and you don't want them there, you can cover them with this art and you're not likely to really tell it's there unless somebody goes up and pushes on it. I always try to remove these old school arcade 1-up power connections there just because I'm never going to use them. Now you can still see the cutout for sure in the plexi, but I mean, you could push on them and you're not going to tear through, if you get good art especially, you're not going to tear through good art. This is from Escape Pod and it's really thick, so I don't feel too worried about it. If you have some bad kids in your house that may try to push their finger through that, then they can probably get through it if they try hard enough. Now, like I said in my original video, which was the reveal of this, I wish I'd thought this out a little bit better. The side view of the cabinet is not as beautiful. I still want to come up with something to block this area so you can't see it. I just haven't done it just yet. I have a few ideas, I just haven't really made it happen yet. So if you're handy enough and you want to actually change the way you cut the side panel, go for it. It's definitely possible. I'm just not that handy. I knew a straight cut was going to be the best I was going to pull off, and then I just didn't anticipate that looking kind of bad, so I'm going to fix that down the line, hopefully. So once your deck is ready to go and you've got the art installed on the deck, you really don't have to do much else major work to the outside of the cabinet. That's when I would say install your art. Wait till the last, pretty much the last step to install this art, just because you don't want to mess up your art later if you have to touch anything up. If you have to paint something, you don't want it getting on the art. So I thought it looked really good just to put it on at the end, and it worked out perfectly. After that, I did the usual buttoning up of things installed. This is the first time I've ever put the PC power button inside. This button actually shuts down the computer, so I just reach in, press the button, shut it down, and then I install my power strip, which is right here. Reach in, flip this switch, it turns it off. And that brings us to one more step. You're gonna have a giant back piece if you don't cut it off. I waited till after everything was pretty much done to cut this piece. I also painted this part. I decided to paint a little bit extra just in case it was visible from the side of the cabinet, and it ended up looking really nice. I did not cut any special holes to let these wires go through the back. I don't really care personally, and again, I plan to put something back here to block this back view. You will have to drill a new hole here if you want to be able to reach in and pull it out like the finger hole, because you're cutting that part off of the original panel. This hole is drilled just so I can reach in and hit the power button for the PC. This hole is here. It looks like it goes to the subwoofer, but it's actually for the power switch right there. And then I drilled an extra hole just to let the power cable come out the back, which is a nice 6-foot long power strip cord, and it plugs right into the wall. And it's really clean. That's the only wire coming out of the back of this, except for these up here which go down into the cabinet. And that's really it. It wasn't that difficult of a build. It was more nerve-wracking than anything because I had to cut a otherwise perfectly fine arcade 1-up cabinet that would have not been perfectly fine if I cut it wrong. Now, it was my idea, but I do think it's a really great idea. I still think it would be great for a widescreen fighting cabinet. Am I going to try one? No, I just don't have the room for it. I don't have any real love for those newer games, but I think if someone does it down the line, please send me a video, a picture of it. I would love to hear how it worked out. And if you're okay with it, I would love to put it on the channel. So be sure to email me if you build something like this, even if you just build a shooter cabinet. I'd love to see it, love to see how it comes out, love to see what you do differently. So that's all for this video. I won't keep you guys too much longer, and I swear I'm going to quit talking about this cabinet soon. You're maybe just going to see some gameplay videos coming from it in the near future. If I come up with something to fix the back view, I will definitely make a video on that, but I'm still kind of brainstorming and looking at all the options. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more classic arcade content and more arcade 1-up mods. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.